नमस्ते, हेलो एंड वेलकम बैक टू माय चैनल। मुझे पूरा यकीन है कि आप सब खैरियत से होंगे, खुश होंगे, कुशल मंगल होंगे। तो आज का वीडियो शुरू करने से पहले आपको मैं बता दूं कि ये वीडियो बहुत बार रिक्वेस्ट किया गया है और एक ही शख्स के द्वारा रिक्वेस्ट किया गया है। आई थिंक ही मस्ट हैव सेंड मी मोर देन 100,000 मैसेजेस फॉर दिस वीडियो। तो मुझे भी क्यूरियोसिटी हो गई कि यार क्या है स्पेशल ऐसा इस वीडियो में कि this guy is so adamant for this video. So I wanted to find out, and the gentleman who actually requested this video is Utsav Chakraborty. So Mr. Chakraborty, finally we are going to react to this video together, right? So this video was posted in 10th March 2021, so this is not so old one, in the Chanakya Dialogue English platform. So the title of the video is China's Expansionist Ideology Reasons. Sounds great. So shall we start? I don't know what to expect from this video. I don't know what is there. I can only understand what title says, but it says very less. So let's find out together. Head.
Hi, this is Major Gaurav Arya, and you're watching the Chanakya Dialogues. Do not forget to like and subscribe. Press the bell icon so that you get notifications first.
Already did. Okay.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Chanakya Dialogues. Now, whatever happened with China, that face-off at the line of actual control, and finally, disengagement in which both the parties, China and India, decided to take one step back. But Ambassador Stobdan feels that India and China are not enemies. He says in one of his talks that China thinks in centuries, in terms of centuries. They have a long-term vision. Their vision is strategic. And China is doing something else. Let's speak to him. It's my honor and privilege to welcome to this program Ambassador Stobdan, former ambassador to Kyrgyzstan, and he's also been in the National Security Council. Sir, a very warm welcome to our show, sir.
Thank you. Thank you.
Sir, as I said, I saw this talk of yours, extremely impressive, in which you say that, India and China are not enemies, they cannot be enemies, but China has other plans which have wider ramifications. China thinks in terms of centuries, they think long-term, they think strategic. Could you please amplify, sir?
Well, when I said China is not an enemy, it is said not in terms of that we are historical enemies. We've never been enemies because India-China relation goes back to 3000, even written history says. So I've never heard that we were enemies. We were neighbors, we were important civilizational partners. We exchanged a lot of views, ideas. We've learned a lot each other. But certainly today China has become a challenge. I would still not call it enemy, but I would call it China is a threat. China is a challenge, not as a threat.
Wait, China is not enemy, but challenge, threat. I mean, don't we consider the threat as our enemies? I don't know, maybe.
But China is a challenge. Challenge because it's a growing power.
Yes.
It's a growing power. It's a power which is aspiring to become number one, already challenging United States. So it has accumulated a lot of strength, political, military, economic, about it. So it poses a certain amount of anxiety, also apprehension in our mind that what is real intention of China, especially in terms of territorial expansion. Secondly, when it, as you rightly said, when the Chinese planned, they think strategically. I would say when we use the term strategy, the Chinese tend to use strategy in terms of philosophy, the grandiose thing, in the long term philosophical outlook, where that tendency in our country is to see strategy as something like cooperating somewhere, on climate change, or maybe let's work in Afghanistan, that's our strategic. I think that's more tactical rather than strategy. You can collaborate, you can work together somewhere, but for the Chinese, strategy means far more deeper of long-term trust building or becoming friends or something like that.
Even civilizational, sir?
Civilizational or something like that. Strategy is for them is quite different than what we understand. Of course, the strategy is now used very loosely by everybody.
Sure.
But I think most of it should fall in the realm of tactic rather than strategy.
Sure.
And as Sun Tzu said it, that tactic without the strategy is a noise before defeat.
Oh. Tactics without a strategy is noise before the defeat. I should be writing this.
So therefore, we have to use these terminologies very, very carefully. So when the Chinese talk about strategy, they would mean probably something much deeper, something much longer, something more philosophical, lasting longer. Whereas I think our understanding of strategy is quietly Western, Western conception of
Short term, sir.
of building some cooperation, allies or something like that. But I cannot exactly explain to you. But at the most, the example that I could see that we could emulate is that China-Russia relationship. It's a waterfall model. From the top you fall, you build a trust between two leaders, then everything falls down accurately. So this new strategic model which the Chinese and the Russians have built up can be a good model, because I think the Wuhan process was like that. It was to be a process of building trust between Prime Minister Modi and President Xi Jinping. Well, twice they met and probably it didn't work. So that model, I think, is also failed now.
Sure.
Bottoms up model is not working because since 1989 or 88, we've been working together on a lot of things. It has really not translated into something very substantive, although economy has, cooperation has grown, but still a lot of misunderstanding remains and it becomes prone to conflict. So with China, I think the problem is that maybe the Russians understand China better than we understand China. We don't have a tradition of understanding China properly. Whereas the Chinese have a better understanding of India because they have been studying us for the last 3,000 years. We haven't actually got, a lot of Indian scholars and Pandits went to China, but they settled there. They haven't come back to teach us how the Chinese behave or how the Chinese think. There is this disparity in understanding each other. So sometimes what happens is that what I say is not understood well by the Chinese, and what the Chinese tell us, we take it in a very wrong sense. So often it happens that we do not, we miss the communication. What you call it in military terms, strategic communication is, there's a problem somewhere.
Yes, sir.
How do you convey? Even in the recent phase of conflict in or standoff in Leh, I saw it's always better. That's why I think I like in the disengagement process, the government has controlled the discourse. The communication has to be conveyed through government itself, not too much through public media or, that creates a lot of problem. And secondly, many of the issues between India and China should not be discussed too much in public.
Oh, sure.
If it matters to security, it should be discussed between the two security agencies, between China and India, within the domain of the government system. What happens is both in China and India is that now many of the issues have.
Why this is? Because the China has Communist Party, government is like communist, right? If I'm not wrong. So that is why we should not be talking issues with China in public.
Out of the control, and it become a public issue. And once it becomes a public issue,
Then there is pressure on both the governments.
yeah, and it becomes a diplomatic.
Sure.
And once it goes into the domain of diplomacy, then everything opens up. Say then they will look at their diplomatic issues with Pakistan, our diplomatic issue with the United States, and so therefore it gets into a different tone. So therefore many of the issues, I think, if you are old civilizations, civilization normally don't pose threat to each other.
Sure.
Who poses threat to civilization are the barbarians.
Sure.
Uncivilized people pose a threat.
Sure.
I think in our own history, we were threatened by the barbarians, and it came from the north,
Sure.
from wherever they came,
Sure.
Turks and Huns and all this Greeks or whoever came. The Chinese also were threatened by the hordes from Mongolia or somewhere in Siberia.
Sure.
As such, the civilization don't pose threat to each other.
So one thing which I'd like to ask you, sir, I'm sorry I'm interrupting. You said that the Russians understand Chinese better than we understand the Chinese, which is really unfortunate because we have 3,000 years of recorded history, sir, shared recorded history.
Yeah.
I've read in school about Yuan Sang coming to India and exploring India and seeing the courts of kings and how the common people live and work in India, and this entire this system in India. And we've had Chinese scholars coming to Takshashila and other places to study. But unfortunately, what happened, sir, over a period of a few hundred years, past 100 years?
Yeah, we got disrupted somewhere in the 11th century.
Sir, all right.
11th
All
century.
the centers of learning, Takshila, Nalanda, Vikramshila, whatever universities that we had the best universities in the world.
Yeah.
Sir.
All the best universities of India. I think by 9th, 10th, 11th century, all these universities got destroyed because of the Arab invasion or some Islamic onslaughts or something.
Sure.
They got burnt or they got dissipated. And the Chinese stopped coming because there was no place for the Chinese to go. Nalanda disappeared by 11th century. Bakhtiyar Khilji
Yes, sir.
destroyed it. Takshila must have been done by somebody else. So there was no purpose for the Chinese to come here and learn. We could not
Because
go.
there was no place to learn, sir.
Yeah.
They burnt everything
so,
down.
So I think by inadvertently we got disconnected. And then the colonial period started. During Mughal period, of course, we didn't meet. There was a different history altogether. And the British, British were more into colonization rather than getting Asia together to Chinese and Indians. That discourse was not there, part of it. So I think the whole process of India-China engagement got disrupted by 10th, 11th century. But obviously, they have a different history, the imperial history. We have a different history. We were not so affected as much as Chinese were affected. They had internal rift, war, warlords, the empires collapse.
So before we go ahead, I wanted to understand this thing, that what he says, His Excellency Stobdan, that somehow this is our fault also because India and Indians do not understand Chinese. I mean, China is our immediate neighbor, but still Russian understand Chinese more than Indian. That is quite a statement. Frankly speaking, somehow I agreed to it. He's right, like we have been focusing about the Western countries more than the Eastern countries. So when it comes to knowing our neighbors, probably this is what biggest hindrance in India's path. Like, we know about America, we know about Europe, we know about Middle East, we know about Africa, but the Eastern countries, China, Japan, Korea, Mongolia, we know nothing about it. We actually don't know about our neighbors. So let's move ahead.
Dynasties collapse. So the Chinese are a paranoid nation. They felt threatened from all sides. I must tell you that Chinese are though 94%. The Han Chinese are 94% of the population, but they have control over only 40% of their territory. 60% of their territory is widely opened. And they get anxiety, they get threatened. Why this entire territory will be conquered?
It's only towards the east of China that you find more population.
In the coastal area.
Sir.
So they have this natural anxiety, tendency to have apprehension that everything is seen as a threat to China. So defending China would be more difficult than invading China.
Is it?
If we want to invade China, it will be easier. And for the Chinese, defending China is very difficult. You know, British the young husband in 1904, he went from Kalimpong towards Lhasa. It was very easy, and for the first time, Chinese thought, you know, they were invaded by the British from the Himalayas.
Sure.
And since then, they woken up, and they are very, very worried. Similarly, I think Russian during the Tsar period, the Anglo-Russian game, they were particularly perturbed by the threat the Russian posed, the Russian Empire, I mean Tsarist Russia, posed to the Chinese unity and all that thing. Obviously, that's part of the imperial history. And what I am concerned is more about the Manchu period. I'm not concerned about what happened during the
What
Ming
period?
dynasty, during the Yuan dynasty, during Tang dynasty. We were quite friendly.
Sure.
I know you are going to judge me for this, but I'll tell you what, all these dynasties, these gentlemen is talking about, Mr. Stobdan, His Excellency, I have only heard it in Hindi dubbed Chinese movies or Chinese movies with English subtitle. So, I know this dynasty stuff is a little hard for me to grasp because I need to study more, I need to understand it more. But still, I'm just making some notes and wanted to understand it. And we will discuss after the video also. So please be with me, watch the complete video. Most probably you're going to enlighten me much more than the video for sure.
It is only Qing dynasty from 1644 to 1912. That is a period that I think, and today if the Chinese are coming to Ladakh, is mainly coming because of the Qing history.
What?
The Qing occupied Tibet, and today they think this is Tibet. If the Chinese say that,
There's an international boundary. We have borders.
okay, Pangong Tso is mine, why do they say that? There must be some logic in that. So they go back to the history of Qing period, and the Qing said the Tibetans collected something, control over that area, wherever that they're coming today in the eastern Ladakh. And the basis of that today the Communist Party of China is claiming. That's the problem. Qings were very, very bad towards Han. But today the same Communist Party, which is made out of Han people, are using the Manchu tactics to invade every country, whether
What
it's
is
South
Manchu
China Sea
tactics?
or
What is Manchu tactics? Let's go.
in Vietnam or Japan or India, everywhere. So it's a very complicated thing, and we need to understand what makes China and India as problematic, confrontational. There must be some force. It cannot be just United States. United States has different interests, of course. There are historical reasons that we haven't understood.
So there is one thing which I'd like to ask you, sir. Very interesting that you should mention it. For example, the Qing dynasty came up to Tibet, and they say that we have our claim to Ladakh, and they see Ladakh as a natural extension of Tibet, or whatever they see. They say that, all right, this is also part of us. And then the Han Chinese and the Communist Party of China, which comprises largely of Han because they're 94%. So they see it as a historical thing. Similarly, in India, sir, the Dogras went up to Tibet also, sir. The Dogras also conquered parts of Tibet.
That is where I think the Indian got played into the Chinese hand.
Sir.
Indian state doesn't talk about Dogra narrative. Who are the icons of Ladakh? Zorawar Singh,
Sir.
Ranjit Singh,
Sir.
Hari Singh,
Sir.
Gulab Singh.
Sir.
How many times we read about Gulab Singh in our history? We only talk about Dalai Lama.
Sir. But why don't we talk about Zorawar Singh, sir? Why don't we talk about...
You ask the Indian state, we talk about Manchu dynasty.
But sir, again, what you're pointing out is very surprising, sir. And I agree with you. I'm not saying I disagree. I 100% agree with you. But I don't understand why.
Who are the icons, the celebrities of the Himalayas?
Sir.
Zorawar Singh.
Sir.
But you and me,
Sir.
He was the father of Indian Army.
Sir.
But how many children in our schools know about Zorawar Singh? Whose fault is that? Nation hasn't built this narrative that we are the people they have to build up to claim this area on our history. Because in this history, if the Tibetans came, we also went.
Sir.
And Zorawar Singh was beheaded by the Manchu or Tibetan, whatever that military alliance they had in 1843 or 1844. In Taklakot, he was slaughtered.
Shit.
But we shy away from talking about it, that history.
Why
That
we are
history is very-
shy? I mean, why we are shy? Why we are not told about these informations, these I mean, this should be in our education. Like what he said about the Dogra kings, I know little about Dogra kings. They were like Kashmir, Jammu, Afghanistan, and all those provinces that ruled by the Dogra kings for a very long time. Even the last king of Kashmir, Maharaja Hari Singh, also come from the same dynasty, Dogra dynasty. But how many of us know all these things, and why this is our history and why this is not been accommodated in our syllabus, that I don't understand. And Zorawar Singh, the father of Indian Army, I never heard about him. I was not even aware about the fact that he's a father of Indian Army. How many of you were aware about it? Honestly, please let me know in comment box. Let's go ahead.
Important.
But sir, you tell me, sir, you're a Ladakhi, sir. And
Okay.
I have read
Great.
that Ladakhis and Tibetans were also in conflict because of grazing grounds. Is that true, sir? There were conflicts because of grazing grounds.
Yeah, that's the thing. You know, most of the war Ladakhis fought was against the Tibetans.
Sir.
We didn't have too many conflict with, you know, it was not just Tibetan, but it was Tibetan-Mongol lines under the Manchu
Sure.
dynasty. They were all controlled by Peking court. So like we were controlled by Mughal court, they were controlled by the Manchu court in Peking.
Sure.
So they invaded us.
The sad part is, before we go ahead, because what Mr. Stobdan, His Excellency, has been telling us is going to blow my mind for sure and blow your mind also. But before we go ahead, I want to ask one stupid question to all my viewers, all the friends in YouTube. How many of us know these things? We have just started. This is the first chapter for me towards East, towards China. So how many of us know all these informations? I mean, most probably half of our youth doesn't know anything about Chinese except Chinese food, and that too momos, chow mein, and Manchurian. Do we know anything else about China? About all these dynasties, these invasions? Zorawar Singh, who is the father of Indian Army. Ranjit Singh, of course, Maharaja Ranjit Singh, we know little about him. Not because of our school and college syllabus. Let's go ahead.
We used to fight, and so what you saw today in Chushul or in Galwan,
Sir.
for us it's not a new thing. This
It's
has
been
been
happening for
happening
ages, sir.
for centuries.
Sir.
The same tactic.
Sir.
We used to suffocate the Tibetan army to death,
Sir.
freeze them under minus temperature.
Sir.
So many things. I mean, stabbing and all that thing was a common for us.
Sir.
For a very long time, we were under the protection of the Indian state. Initially under the Mughals, then under the Sikhs, then under the British. That's how history evolved. So we would very much like to be part of the Indian ethos because we paid our tax to Delhi Darbar or maybe Lahore Darbar or perhaps in Kashmir Darbar. That's how the history evolved.
Sure, sir.
The people beyond Demchok or into the Tibetan side paid their tribute to Peking court.
Sure.
That's the fault line.
Sure.
So now I think that history is not talked sufficiently in our own discourse. How many people discuss Taklakot and Kailash? Kailash was part of Ladakh. It was taken away in 1682. Half of Ladakh is not with us,
Sir, sir. Absolutely.
Half of Ladakh is today with China. Mount Kailash was Mansarovar. All these were part of Ladakh. In fact, Gulab Singh was called the Prajapati, Maharaja of even Tibet, a part of Tibet. It was called Little Tibet.
Sir.
So in Persian it was called Tibet-e-Khurt. This was there when the Instrument of Act in 1947 signed. He says he is the ruler of Tibet also.
Sir.
But we don't tell our own people about all these things. Rather, we would like to talk about history which is not ours. And therefore, my own sense is that more we...
This is disgusting and very provoking right now.
We are going to get played into the Chinese hand over and over again and again. We will be loser in the long term if we do not correct our history.
We are.
We have to
Indeed, sir.
refine, polish our history. What we have to, and in fact, there is a fault line that what is Himalaya and what is Tibet. Tibet is gone to the Chinese.
Sir.
Now you have to protect the Himalayas. In order to protect the Himalayas, you must understand what is Himalaya and what is not Himalaya. That differentiation, British used to understand, we do not understand. The Americans don't understand at all. British strategists understood, young husband,
Sure.
Curzon. If they wanted to go across the Himalaya into the Tibet and China, they would have gone. But they said no, it will give you diminishing return. Let's protect Bhutan, let's protect Nepal, let's protect Ladakh, let's protect Sikkim. That's my 14.
Was the Himalayas thought to be a sort of a barrier, sir?
No, not barrier in physical terms.
Barrier in civilizational terms?
No, the parameters are quite different.
Okay, so please explain, sir.
It partly is because this is an Indianized terrain. Everybody spoke English from Bhutan to Sikkim to Ladakh.
Sure.
Across the Himalaya, nobody spoke English. They all spoke Mandarin or some whatever Mongol or Mongol, whatever they spoke. So we all had eaten rice, the masalas,
Yes.
and Darjeeling tea. The other side eats noodle. I'm giving you a lot of examples of how you have to differentiate. It's not just the geographical terrain. Across the border, it's a Trans-Himalaya, and then the plateau starts. So the Himalayan thing is very important. Even if you want to talk about Buddhism, there is something called Himalayan Buddhism.
Oh.
Not necessarily it has to be Chinese Buddhism or Tibetan Buddhism.
Sir.
Himalayan, but nobody talks about Himalayan Buddhism.
What is Himalayan Buddhism, sir?
Yeah, that
Buddha,
is a
Buddha
question.
is the Rishi Muni, Padmasambhava, the yogi, this Siddhi Buddhism.
That is Himalayan
People-
Buddhism. Okay, it's
like
all
close to
Sanatan thing.
Hinduism, of course. Same Hindu priest went into the Himalayas in the high altitude. They attain Siddha, the certain amount of
Enlightenment.
like Rishikesh, all these things. So, where you cross the Himalaya, other side is little bit something different, which I cannot explain.
Sir.
So, what is happening in the post-independence is that all things got confused now.
Sir.
We think everything is same. No, everything is not same. Like in South India, you go, everybody used to say that, look, it was a Madrasi. No, everybody is not Madrasi.
Yeah, that's true.
Somebody is Telugu, somebody is a Malayali, somebody is something like that. So we have our own fault lines. So what I see the intellectual and scholarship in India is that everybody is a Lama. No, it's not like that. The Bhutanese have their own Lama. Sikkim has its own Lama. We have our own Lama.
Ladakh
But
is.
therefore, it's very difficult to explain in strategic term. I'm not trying to tell you everything in spiritual term, but what it means strategically in security terminology, specificities are very important. You have to know the specific terrain, specific culture, specific religion, specific issues. Then only I think this is where the Chinese will score more point, because the war is asymmetrical. And I think Ladakh or any part of Himalaya cannot be defended only through military means.
Sir.
You have to have many other power system to defend ourselves. And this is where I think the Chinese are like fishes fishing in a very comfortable water. Whereas for us, we have to, heavy lifting is done by only army. Everything depends on armed forces to defend. Why should only armed forces be defending? We should have other means to defend ourselves. And I'm not sure whether we are well equipped today. The war has not extended, but then some people say there's a 5th generation war has been launched already by the Chinese.
Sure.
Today people are only talking about digital and cyber and all these things. But there are certain invisible war which has been already been launched. And this is where I'm saying that you have to know the specifics.
Sir, let me come to you, sir. You mentioned Ladakh, and you said that during the course of our conversation, you said that the Chinese have this obsession with Ladakh. And in the sense of now saying that it's not just about the line of actual control. How do you define that, sir? It's not about just the line of actual control, it's much more.
The idea in the beginning was that why they're pushing in Ladakh,
Sir.
because they have nothing to lose in Ladakh. There's no economy there. There's no gold or oil or something. They only have to gain.
Sir.
And when they have to gain, why do they gain? There's an empty land and barren land. What do they have to gain?
Cold desert rather, sir.
Yeah. I think in common sense, they gain more territories to bargain somewhere else. That could be one military strategy.
Sure.
You can grab as many land as possible. There are no human being lives here. So it's empty land, you go vacant land, you occupy it, encourage upon that. And then you use it as a political tool to bargain somewhere else on trade, economy, or maybe even Arunachal Pradesh. That could be one reason. But what has happened is that during this post-Galwan clash, the Ladakh incident or standoff has invoked a lot of scholars within China.
Sure.
And I have seen that a lot of these websites, Chinese websites, are coming out with the history of Ladakh, the culture of Ladakh,
Okay.
the whole new things.
Okay.
And they are saying, no, it has been part of Tibet, the Tabo dynasty, all kind of things they are writing. So what I'm trying to say is they are revisiting the history of Ladakh, which is very, very
Dangerous.
dangerous.
Yes.
Then I'm worried about that. I do not want Ladakh to be revisited in historical sense
Yes.
by the Chinese. That's why we have to take our own history seriously.
But so, for a casual observer, it is something that he may not be able to comprehend, because you're saying that revisiting history is dangerous. And obviously you're looking at it from a very wide lens, because you have that sort of
Yeah.
perspective. But a common normal observer will say, how does it matter if the Chinese revisit history? How is it going to impact India? And that is my question to you, sir.
He will translate that into military.
You're saying historical, there will be a historical justification for future conflict.
So when they are building a narrative, they will go back to history, isn't it?
Sure.
If the Chinese are going to South China Sea, they are going back to 200 years of some Chinese fellow must have gone into some island, and now they are reclaiming like that, and they said, okay, Japanese and the Korean or the Vietnamese have occupied it. So the Chinese have the tendency to go back to the history. And since they think Tibet is part of China, and if somewhere indirectly Tibetans had controlled Ladakh, then they'll build a narrative accordingly, you see, isn't it?
Sir.
So it is not about the boundaries. He's talking about the cultural boundary here. Like, for example, even in that case, there are lots of Tibetan people who lives in Himachal, so they can claim Himachal also in that scenario, because it has a cultural influence there. Tibetan lives there in Himachal also. And if you see, if we work on this strategy, probably we can claim the half of the world, because Maharaja Ranjit Singh had his dynasty till Iran. Afghanistan was a part of his kingdom. Kabul was his capital. Pakistan, Bangladesh was a part of India. Like, Dogra kings ruled the half of the Tibet.
Because end of the day, in 1959, they got hold of all the important files in Potala. If Tibet was an independent state, it had fallen into the Chinese hand in 1959. Yes, and they got all the maps and documents and blueprints of the Tibetan government. So they are sitting today in Lhasa. Once they have control over Lhasa, they have all the pictures, the history, culture, religion. So therefore, they will naturally build their case according to what the Tibetans did and what the Tibetans didn't do. So that's why it's very important. Otherwise, we do not really pose this question to the Chinese that, okay, boss, why do you come to Galwan Valley? What is the locus standi? Did it belong to the father of Xi Jinping? Who asked this question?
Yes.
Yeah.
Then they will have to explain. When they explain in some rational term, they will have to give some history, no? It's not just out of dream they will claim certain areas.
Sure.
So obviously, I am a historical oriented person. You can say in the case of boundary, there are customary boundaries, there are British boundaries. We have a forward British line of thinking, like in this Johnson line in Ladakh and McMahon line in the east. But the Chinese do not agree with that. The Chinese believe in their own customary boundary. And what is this customary boundary? Customary boundary is boundary between Ladakh and Tibet, boundary between Tibet and Sikkim, Tibet and Nepal, Tibet and Bhutan, and so on and so forth. So, Nehru outrightly rejected that definition of customary boundary. He had picked up the British boundary, British definition of boundary. Right? There's a McMahon line, there's the Johnson line. They have the other line, so we don't meet on the issue of boundary. But as you rightly said that now people are talking about 59. What is that 59 line of thinking? Why did China think about 1959 line? What happened in 1959? I'm a little bit curious what happened in 1959. There was something happened in 62 also, something happened in 60 also, maybe 55, 54 we signed the Panchsheel. So many things happened, but why they are sticking to 1959? There must be some reason that they think 1959, they formally, I think I understood was they formally occupied Lhasa. And His Holiness came this side. Yeah. We haven't done enough research in terms of why Chinese are behaving the way they are behaving now. And if they are saying 59, 59, 59, 59, I'm a little bit worried. That's again going back to history. So there is this tendency, therefore, and then the use of Ladakh is a problem. And therefore, I think the making Union Territory of Ladakh is extremely important. Not just from the administrative point, now you have to build a narrative. Ladakh had claim over Tibet, not Tibetan had a claim over Ladakh. Yes. What I am trying to say that Western Tibet was Ladakh, which we have to reclaim.
Yes, sir.
Indian civilization is incomplete without Kailash Mansarovar.
Yes,
of course.
Kailash Mansarovar.
Of course.
That's the epitome of our civilizational ethos.
Sir.
But it has to be retaken. I have an interest in Tibet for nothing else but to regain my territory.
Sure.
Rudok, Gartok, Mansarovar,
ये नाम भी नहीं सुने यार हम लोगों ने, वो जो नाम ले रहे हैं ना, वो नाम भी नहीं सुने हैं, मैंने तो एटलीस्ट नहीं सुने हैं. इट इज़ अ वेरी शॉकिंग वीडियो, शॉकिंग इन्फॉर्मेशंस.
All these are our places. Till the 17th century, our rulers were ruling that area. Somehow they took it by force. But I don't see in the narrative like this that, instead we talk about Peking. Peking is very far away. we should be talking about regaining our lost territories. With the Sikhs, the Dogras, the Ladakhis,
yes,
everybody very, very fondly ruled over and occupied. And therefore, making Union Territory of Ladakh is historical. And I think the Chinese understood this. Sure. On the 5th of August 2019, when we abrogated 370 and made Ladakh as Union Territory, on the 6th they started making noise. On the 16th they went to United Nations Security Council and talked about Ladakh. And since then now they have been building this case about all these things. Absolutely. Along with Pakistan. Absolutely. So they understood that we have to build, that we want to occupy Tibet now. Sure. Not whole of Tibet, but of course the territory which is Ladakhis, but controlled in China, by China in Tibet. So that's a future history we should be working about it rather than being defensive. Sure. It should no longer be about line of actual control or 1 feet there or 2 feet here. That's not. It's about history. History itself. History is that Ladakh is incomplete right now. Without Kailash. And without Gilgit-Baltistan on the other side. Yeah.
Yes.
Yes. The history. Aksai Chin, I'm not interested.
Why not, sir?
I'm interested in Kailash Mansarovar.
Why not Aksai Chin?
But people, in our documents is Aksai Chin, which is very important. Sure. That is, whatever 38,000 square kilometer we has to be retake. Well, it's a official formulation. It should remain. Sure. But in academically, this is where I used to go. I mean, our interest used to be along the Indus, to the mouth of Ganges and to the mouth of Brahmaputra.
So what Mr. Stobdan is saying, His Excellency is saying is that rather than focusing on a piece of land that because China is claiming these territories on basis of history, they are like collecting the historic evidences and claiming these areas, and of course like they have reached out to United Nations one day after we abrogate the 370 and 35A. So what he's saying is we should also focus on that line of intelligence and build our narrative, work on these areas. We should be more like, thorough with this like, we know nothing about our own history, like Dogras, Sikhs, Zorawar Singh, Ranjit Singh. The half of the Tibet was a part of India, ruled by the Dogra dynasty and the Sikh dynasty. Wow. Let's finish this first.
In the
Then we will
Bansal
talk.
I never went into that Aksai Chin route for nowhere. It's a desert. It's a desolate place to nowhere.
So initially, when that Pakistan, we had war with the Pakistan in 48. Then when we pushed them back, so LOC came in existence, and that side of Kashmir and the Gilgit Baltistan was also thought to be deserted, and we left it because of that reason only. Because initially, though, that time politicians thought it has nothing, no production, no agriculture, no trade. That was only a route, and they ignored it because real Malay was here in this part of India, this part of Kashmir. So that was a mistake. I don't know whether what His Excellency is saying, Mr. Stobdan, is a correct statement for Aksai Chin. I think we should claim that part also. And of course, what he's saying about that Indus Valley route is a very important terrain for us, and to safeguard us from the China, this is the only strategy which sounds fruitful to India.
Till you reach Khotan.
Sure.
Khotan I have an interest because that is a place where it's a Sanskrit name called Gausthan, where Ashoka's son ruled for a very long time, Emperor Ashoka's. It used to be a Hindu kingdom for a very long time.
Really?
So a lot of interest. We are not intellectually sound to claim this area. We are simply relying on military muscles and military argument, which is important but
that is only one part of it. So it's not the entire piece.
Yes.
We don't write about it. We don't talk about it. The universities, I don't know what they teach, but certainly they don't teach.
This what I'm talking about. Like all of us. I mean, whole 15 years of schooling, the graduation, the post-graduation, whatever you guys have done it. How many of us know these facts, what this gentleman is talking right now? I mean, I don't even know the half of the terms he's using, names and the dynasties and blah, 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 blah. I have just noted down certain things, but I don't know.
These important issues of nation,
Yes.
and reduce nationalism into a very narrow sense is bad. Chinese are expanding because they are expanding on the basis of their history. We are not expanding on the basis of history. We are expanding, we are talking about nationalism in a very religious sense.
We are not expanding, we are contracting. The Bangladesh has gone, the Pakistan is no more with us. Now this China is claiming our territory. The Pakistan occupied Kashmir is on stake. Aksai Chin, you have just mentioned it. And I remember a couple of months, maybe a year back, article in Chinese newspaper. They claimed Mount Everest as their territory. And there was a big debate.
That will confine ourselves to maybe sometime in the North Indian, some couple of states. Why should India be shrunk to a couple of things? Why? Sure, Kabul,
Yes.
To Lanka, to, I don't know, whole of China maybe even. So that part is
Yes.
missing. That's very important.
Thank you very much for talking to us, sir. Ladies and gentlemen, with Ambassador Stobdan, he spoke about a lot of issues. Chinese psychology, why Chinese do what they do, how do they think, also history. The claim to Ladakh, the Chinese claim to Ladakh is not based actually only upon the line of actual control. It's based on history. And he says, what about our great generals, like General Zorawar, about the great Ladakhi warriors, the great Maharaja Ranjit Singh. Yes. We do not teach our children enough about history, and which is why our argument often falters. Thank you for joining in. We'll join you again next week with another special guest. Till then, from my team and I, here at the Chanakya Dialogues, Jai Hind.
Jai Hind. And what he just said, like, whom to blame for this? Like, do we blame ourselves for not reading and not knowing all these things? From where we are going to read and study all these things? That is the question. Like, this is not in our school syllabus. This is not in our college studies. Mr. Phunchok Stobdan is amazing guy. And I wanted to say that. I am no one to say that. But I wish people like him should be included in, government, education system, the policy making, the foreign affairs, the syllabus making for the next generation at least. As he began with the conversation, he said like we have a history of 3000 years with China, and China knows almost everything about us because China have been studying us, India and Indians, from last 3000 years. Even China's scholars, like, they're very regular to India. They stopped coming after 11th century when Mughals invaded us, because they destroyed the universities, Nalanda and Takshila, of course. I am in such a shock right now after watching this video, because what an amazing statement that we never thought. How many of us thought about this fact that I've just mentioned out here, that China is claiming land based on culture and history of their civilization, not international boundary we know today. That has no relevance in China's perspective. I feel very much cheated, misguided, and betrayed by our education system and our government. And I have never seen anything like this interview. Trust me, guys. I have realized that I know nothing about my country, and I know nothing about my neighboring country, what I mean. This video has so much information that I'm gonna watch it again and again. I don't know, because it's 34 minutes video and I have made more than 40 points, and I think that I've missed lots of things also in this. Honestly speaking, now I've realized that I've started to coming to that Jagruti state from the sleeping state, Shusupta avastha se Jagriti avastha ki taraf मैं बढ़ रहा हूँ. Why it was not told, why it was not taught, why it is not there in this, I still don't understand. Maybe because reason behind not teaching these topics to Indian students is that they know about us, like the Indian mind is the best in the world. And once we get this awareness, these people will be in trouble. Like, we have a habit of speaking loud. We talk about our problems very loudly. The whole world is against India for this reason, because internationally we don't have much of a talk to offer. This video, मतलब इस वीडियो ने इतना कुछ बता दिया ना. मैं 15 साल की स्कूलिंग में शायद मैंने इतना चाइना के बारे में स्पेशली नहीं जाना होगा. This was the most shocking, provoking, and sublimingly constructive conversation I have heard so far in YouTube. So please, guys, let me know what is your opinion on this matter, this topic. Let's talk on comment box also. It was a wonderful video to watch, and I wanted to thank Utsav also, Utsav Chakravarti. Thank you so much, brother. Anyways, thank you so much for watching this video. I just wanted to make a request that please do subscribe to my channel. You know that your one subscription matters to me. And do like, share, and subscribe, please. I'll see you in next video. Thank you.